Talk about a tale of two takes. On one side, you have Gilbert Arenas handing out an A+ grade for the Anthony Davis blockbuster. On the other, Nick Young is blasting Washington as the place where legends go to die, calling it a dumping ground for careers on their last legs. Today, we are diving deep into the locker room gossip and the analysts' heat maps to see exactly how players, coaches, and pundits are processing the shockwave of Anthony Davis landing with the Washington Wizards. But first, if you love non-stop NBA updates, smash that like button and subscribe right now. Let's kick things off with Gilbert Arenas. We are talking about a guy who practically has the DC playbook tattooed on his soul, Agent Zero himself. This is the icon who put the franchise on his shoulders, draining game winners and single-handedly making the nation's capital a basketball powerhouse again. So when the ticker flashed that AD was DC bound, did Arenas flinch? Not for a microsecond. He jumped immediately onto his platform, Gil's Arena, and dropped a verdict that might surprise you. Listen closely, because he gave the Wizards a shining A+ for pulling the trigger on this deal. And this was not just him being a homer. Arenas broke down the X's and O's of why this specific move flips the script for the organization. He highlighted the lethal pick and roll synergy waiting to happen between Trae Young and Anthony Davis. You look at that duo on paper, and it is a nightmare scenario for any defense trying to stop them. Then he pivoted to the defensive potential, pointing out how young studs like Alex Sarr and Bilal Coulibaly playing alongside, Davis creates a terrifying wall. He envisions a squad that could dominate both sides of the hardwood. In his own words, you create a lineup pairing, A, D, with Trae Young and Alex Sarr, all while keeping your draft assets intact. That is an A+ masterclass in trading. However, Agent Zero keeps it real. He is well aware of the injury cloud that follows Davis, having previously called him one of the most frustrating players to watch, joking that AD falls down once and everyone holds their breath screaming, "Oh my God." Despite that, the former All-Star is officially all in on A. D in Washington. He predicts a serious playoff push if Davis stays healthy, though he even floated the idea that the Wizards should park Davis on the bench this season, tank for a high pick, and load up for a title run next year. Now, let's pivot to Nick Young. If Arenas is the hype man seeing championship banners, then his old running mate from the Wizards locker room, Nick Young, brought a bucket of ice water to the party on Gil's Arena. Swaggy P came in with zero filter and let it fly. Honestly, his take might be the most savage reality check we have heard yet. Nick Young looked at this roster and saw nothing but red flags. No championship upside, no magical potential. He was not buying the pick and roll hype or the defensive savior storyline. What Swaggy P saw with that trademark bluntness that makes him a fan favorite was a franchise acting as a retirement home, a final stop for superstars whose prime years are fading in the rearview mirror. He did not mince words, claiming Washington is essentially the junkyard where teams send their trash when a career is on life support. That is a tough pill to swallow for DC fans. But Young was just getting warmed up. He doubled down by bringing back the one nickname that has haunted Anthony Davis his entire career, a label Davis hates with a passion. Young called him Anthony Street Clothes Davis. The jab is clear. Davis spends more time modeling fashion on the sideline than he does sweating in a jersey on the court. And let's be real, the stats give him some ammo. Davis suited up for only 29 games during his lone stint in Dallas. Yet, even the skeptical Swaggy P had to admit there is one bright spot in this DC move. Trae Young could arguably be the most gifted playmaker Davis has ever paired with. The alley-oop potential is off the charts, even if Nick Young doubts AD. Can stay off the injury report long enough to make it count. Speaking of reactions, let's talk Naji Marshall. While the retired legends were arguing over grades and nicknames, there was someone right inside the storm. Inside the Dallas Mavericks locker room, one player could not hold back his raw emotion. That man was Naji Marshall, the forward who has been grinding alongside Anthony Davis all season. When the notification popped up that AD was being shipped to the Capitol, Marshall did exactly what any of us would do. He hopped on X and fired off a one-word post that summed up the entire vibe. Just one simple word: wow. Seriously, does it get more accurate than that? That 3-letter tweet captured the shock and the sudden impact of the business. 1 second, you are sharing the floor with a 10-time All-Star, and the next, his locker is empty. But here is the twist with Naji Marshall. He didn't dwell on the goodbye. Almost instantly, he shifted his gaze toward the future, focusing on the massive beacon of hope that the Dallas Mavericks are now built around Cooper Flagg, the #1 overall pick, the generational phenom who landed in Dallas thanks to the lottery gods smiling on them with those ping pong balls. And Marshall made his stance on the new era crystal clear, telling reporters, I want to play with Cooper Flagg my whole damn career. That is my dog, and he is going to create history. Just to be a part of it is a blessing. For Marshall, losing AD was not the end of the world. It was the opening chapter of a historic new saga. And honestly, Marshall's pivot perfectly. From the Mavericks' point of view, this deal cuts both ways. On one hand, waving goodbye to a 10-time All-Star leaves a massive void. It is a bitter pill to swallow. However, when you pivot to the future and realize Cooper Flagg is now on the squad of talent with potential, we only see once in a generation. The road ahead suddenly gleams with way more promise than the current situation ever offered. Then there is Kyrie Irving. While Naji Marshall was practically shouting from the rooftops about the excitement in Dallas, Irving, the last superstar standing, on the payroll, handled the breaking news with a much cooler, more calculated demeanor. And honestly, who can fault the guy? We are talking about a veteran who has weathered storm after storm, bouncing from Cleveland to Boston, then Brooklyn, and finally Dallas. Now, he is watching the ground shake beneath his feet all over again. Through his representation, Irving put out a statement that was measured, precise, and classic. Kyrie, he has always been intentional with his words. The bottom line, Uncle Drew is digesting the shakeup, but is staying loyal to the Metroplex. Before we continue, if you are enjoying this breakdown, make sure to smash that like button. Insiders have also confirmed there is zero intention to flip Irving before the trade deadline. The front office actually views him as the seasoned mentor for Cooper Flagg, serving as the bridge connecting two different eras. He is the steady hand needed to navigate a rookie phenom through the brutal NBA learning curve. Former Dallas head coach Avery Johnson weighed in on this very topic on CBS Sports, zeroing in on the billion-dollar question. What happens now with Kai? How does the franchise hit the reset button with him in the picture? Johnson believes Irving is the linchpin. Since Kyrie is shelved for the entire season, recovering from that torn ACL, the timeline gets tricky. Is he part of the immediate blueprint? We know he is approaching the twilight of his career. Do they keep him, or do they ship him off this summer to stack more assets and build a fortress around Cooper Flagg? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more daily updates on this rebuild. Let's rewind for a second. Remember back in 2018 when Irving fantasized about forming a big three with Anthony Davis and Kevin Durant during his Celtics run? That super team never launched. And now, with AD packing his bags out of Dallas, that door is firmly shut. Yet, Kyrie is locked in for the next chapter. There is something actually quite touching about that. Here is a guy who has bounced between so many locker rooms, cities, and system reboots, finally deciding to plant his flag and play the long game. For a Mavericks organization starving for consistency, that quiet pledge of allegiance might be more valuable than any blockbuster return package. Avery Johnson agrees. Sometimes, the best read on a massive trade does not come from the athletes. It comes from the coaches who have survived those war rooms, endured the agonizing strategy sessions, and truly grasped the mechanics and heavy emotions of building a roster. That is exactly the level of expertise former Mavs skipper Avery Johnson dropped when CBS Sports tapped him for analysis. Johnson didn't mince words, describing the move as totally expected for anyone who has been watching closely. He labeled it, quite simply, closure. It is the final page turn for a fan base that has been spiraling ever since the Luka Doncic trade shook the organization's foundation. He laid it out flat. The headline story here is that exactly 1 year and 2 days after the Luka shocker, the Mavericks are already booting Anthony Davis out of town. Avery recalled discussing that initial stunner with the network a year ago. So, how will the Dallas faithful react to this latest bomb? Johnson predicts zero surprise. The fans have been in a state of unrest regarding the Luka deal for a while now. So, sending Anthony Davis packing basically puts a period on what he calls a generational trade. The silver lining? Dallas clears nearly $70 million in cap space next year, giving them massive flexibility to truly construct a contender around Cooper Flagg. Make no mistake, this is officially the Cooper Flagg show. But Johnson didn't just focus on Texas. When asked about the Wizards side of things and the potential of pairing Davis with Trae Young, he gave a brutally honest reality check. He thinks they could scrap their way into the play-in tournament in the East, assuming, and it is a huge assumption, that they stay healthy. That is the ultimate neutralizer. When you look at Anthony Davis as a cornerstone alongside Trae Young, you have to acknowledge Young's struggle to stay on the court, especially recently. It is a massive gamble. Sure, if the stars align, they might crack the postseason, but let's be real, that roster isn't keeping anyone in the Eastern Conference awake at night. Finally, we have to discuss the man who, despite stepping back into a minority ownership role, still commands the spotlight. Let's talk about the loudest voice in the room, Mark Cuban, the billionaire architect who transformed the Mavericks from a joke into a championship powerhouse, the guy who has been screaming from the sideline for 20 years, bleeding team colors. So when the Anthony Davis trade news hit the wire, Cuban didn't panic. His reaction was instant and shockingly upbeat. 2 words, love it. Sounds crazy, right? Who throws a party after shipping off a 10-time All-Star? But Cuban wasn't mourning the loss. He was calculating the gain. He's a shark, always looking at the ROI. He knows saying goodbye to elite talent stings. But he stressed that this move loads the chamber with picks and flexibility to build an empire around Cooper Flagg. Now, Cuban had previously sworn the Mavs could chase a ring with Davis, claiming a healthy roster equaled finals contention. But let's be real, the basketball gods had other ideas. Davis suited up for just 29 games, sat out 51, and the squad limped to a 31-49 record. The standings don't lie, and optimism doesn't win games. Cuban is ready to shred the old script and start penning a new legacy with Flagg as the headliner. Enter Stephen A. Smith. If there is one human being who can turn a trade deadline into a Shakespearean tragedy full of desk-slapping fury and theatrical outrage, it is Stephen A. And oh boy, did he deliver the goods. He didn't just analyze the Anthony Davis swap, he treated it like a crime scene. He used it as proof of a massive cover-up, a plot that has conspiracy theorists and casual fans leaning in closer to their screens. On First Take, Stephen A. went scorched earth on the entire Luka Doncic saga, branding the initial deal a catastrophe, arguably the biggest blunder in NBA history. The crew dissected the last 365 days in Dallas like forensic scientists. It has been one of the most chaotic timelines I've witnessed in my 2+ decades on the beat. It's not just about the Cooper Flagg angle, securing a generational talent right after dumping one, but people forget the Kyrie Irving injury factor. That is the silent killer in this equation that nobody talks about. By the way, if you're loving this breakdown, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Then the spotlight turned to Davis and the critique got razor sharp. Look at the ledger. 29 games played, 51 missed, a record of 31-49 since he touched down in the city. That is simply not winning basketball. Look, Anthony Davis is a god-tier talent when he's right, but Stephen A. kept it real. I'm happy you secured the bag, brother, but your legacy is fast becoming synonymous with being the guy who is never available. But Stephen A. didn't stop at calling the trade a bust. He went full galaxy brain, speculating that this tank job is actually a setup to move the franchise to Las Vegas under the new ownership. He thinks stripping the roster down makes relocating a losing team to Sin City much smoother. My spidey senses are tingling, he said, pointing to the owner's casino background. Whether you buy the Vegas conspiracy or think he's lost his mind, you have to respect the hustle Stephen A. Smith takes the conversation to places no other analyst dares to go. Now, let's pivot to Jake Fischer. While the TV personalities were screaming, there was one insider dropping the kind of nerdy, deep dive analysis that real hoopheads live for. Jake Fischer, one of the sharpest pens in the game, didn't just react, he performed an autopsy on the deal. Fischer was genuinely shocked that the Washington Wizards were the ones pushing their chips into the middle for Anthony Davis. Nobody had DC on their bingo card, but the brilliance lies in how Washington pulled off the heist. They flipped Chris Middleton's expiring money and some mid-tier draft assets to land a 10-time All-Star. That is the definition of buying low and selling high. Fischer pointed out the vision. Pairing Davis with Alex Sarr creates a twin tower defense that is absolutely frightening. That's a wall at the rim that could define their identity for years. Plus, it sends a massive signal regarding the Wizards' commitment to Trae Young, telling him we are trying to win now, which likely means a contract extension is coming. Remember, Fischer reported the Hawks were out on AD, so the market was dry, letting Washington swoop in. In a league where GMs usually panic and mortgage the future for a quick fix, the Wizards managed to snag a superstar without torching their core or emptying the cupboard of draft picks. That is the kind of stealthy, front office maneuvering that builds dynasties. Before we get to the money talk, don't forget to hit subscribe for more daily updates. Now, Bobby Marks. When we need to understand the salary cap gymnastics and the financial weeds of these massive trades, there is nobody better than Bobby Marks. The former exec turned analyst breaks down the dollars better than anyone, and he had some fascinating thoughts on how the numbers truly stack up for everyone involved. Bobby Marks has built his entire brand on dissecting the salary cap mathematics behind major league transactions. So, when the news of the Anthony Davis blockbuster hit The Wire, he immediately went into analysis mode. Looking at this from the Dallas perspective, Marks was absolute in his verdict. They nailed it. He went on record calling this potentially the smartest strategic play the Mavericks organization has made in years. Look, AD is a phenomenal talent, but he simply does not align with their current competitive timeline. Hitting the reset button to wipe the slate clean and acquiring 5 draft picks, and you can argue the value of those picks all day, gives you the ultimate war chest to construct a roster around Cooper Flagg. You are guaranteeing yourself a lottery selection. Marks then dropped a quote regarding Dallas that perfectly encapsulated the emotional significance of this deal for the fan base. It went far deeper than just X's and O's. You are essentially exorcising the ghosts of the past. You cleanse the franchise of everything lingering from the Luka trade era, keeping only Max Christie and that Lakers pick, and you finally move forward. You start building this foundation the proper way around your generational cornerstone and former #1 overall pick in Cooper Flagg. Flipping to the Washington side, Marks was just as bullish, noting that they have effectively used a cheat code on their rebuilding phase. He also shut down the narrative that simply having cap space would have eventually gotten them to this point. Think of it like a crowded nightclub. Instead of waiting outside in the cold, Washington just slipped the bouncer a 20 and walked straight into the VIP section. When you project next year's starting 5 featuring Trae Young, Trae Johnson, Bilal Coulibaly, AD, and Alex Sarr, that is a legitimate squad if they can stay off the injured list. Plus, you still have the youth movement with Carrington, Kaishan, George, Will, Riley, and Champagny. I love the aggression here. Relying on cap space is fool's gold. It is the most overrated asset in the league. You were never going to sign Trae Young on the open market. You certainly weren't signing Anthony Davis. You had to go out and take them. Marks labeled this a calculated risk that could pay massive dividends for the Wizards, highlighting the incredibly bargain bin price tag and the fact that Washington landed a superstar without sacrificing their young core. Then there is David Aldridge. The man is a Hall of Fame journalist and has covered the NBA for decades. When it comes to the Washington Wizards, there is arguably no voice more respected in the entire sports landscape. So when Aldridge hopped on the Grant and Danny show to weigh in on the Davis acquisition, the entire city leaned in to listen. David, we are talking about a genuine blockbuster here. A 10-time All-Star and future Hall of Famer landing in the district. What is your gut reaction to the trade? Honestly, I am just as stunned as everyone else. Not necessarily that they pulled the trigger on a deal, but that the target was Anthony Davis. That distinction is crucial. Aldridge wasn't shocked that the Wizards took a massive swing. They had already signaled they were ready to pivot from tank to compete. He was surprised that the specific chip they pushed all in on was Davis. When he broke it down, he exposed the central gamble that defines this transaction. This is a swing for the fences. A massive, towering home run swing. Not because of the assets they lost, because if you look at the math, they really didn't give up much draft capital, but because they are betting the house on AD actually being a reliable contributor. And remember, this is all about next season. I doubt we see him suit up much, if at all, this year. The gamble is whether he can stay on the floor long enough to elevate the young talent, and that is the eternal riddle that is Anthony Davis. No one questions the skill, but it means nothing if he is in street clothes which has been the story for the last 3 or 4 years. He simply isn't available enough. However, Aldridge also looked at the ceiling here, breaking down the best case scenario with the kind of perspective you only get from being around the league this long. Before we get to that, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you're enjoying the breakdown. The dream scenario is that Davis returns to form, Trae Young continues to dominate, and this squad storms into the playoffs next year without having sacrificed, and this is key, any of their foundational pieces. Aldridge views this as the official death of the tanking era in DC. However, he warned that the upcoming draft lottery remains their Super Bowl. Even with a super team of Trae and AD, securing a top selection in what scouts are calling a loaded draft class is the final piece of the puzzle. That is the foundation for a dynasty. But if that pick slips outside the top 8 and conveys to New York, the math changes drastically. Finally, Fred Katz of The Athletic encapsulated the Wizards' mindset with a question that was deceptively simple, yet perfect. Why not? When you cut through the hot takes and the hysteria and you really sit with it, the logic starts to clear up. Amid the hysteria, Katz delivered what might be the only rational take in the room. His logic, deceptively simple and totally undeniable. He argued that a healthy Anthony Davis is a legitimate monster on the court that is just a stone-cold fact. And the Wizards pulled off this heist without nuking their future. They kept Alex Sarr. They held on to Bilal Coulibaly. They didn't even burn their own first-rounders. Instead, they flipped matching salaries and someone else's draft capital to snag a future Hall of Famer. So, frankly, why not? Katz was also intrigued by the looming contract talks, suggesting that Washington's handling of Davis's $62.8 million option for the 2027-28 season will reveal their master plan. As for Dallas, Katz sees this as a total hard reset, clearing the decks to eventually build a new fortress around Cooper Flagg. In an Bachelor of Arts landscape where every trade is labeled either a stroke of genius or a franchise-killing disaster, the quietest take often wins. And Fred Katz hit the bullseye with just 2 words, why not? If you are digging this breakdown, smash that like button right now. O'Shea Jackson Jr. Shifting gears, we got a reaction from left field that perfectly captured the human side of this. Circus. O'Shea Jackson Jr., yup, Ice Cube's son, the guy who crushed it in Straight Outta Compton, is also a die-hard Lakers head and a serious hoops junkie. He was live on The Rich Eisen Show when the news broke, and his real-time gut check reaction was absolutely priceless. While the cameras were rolling, the ticker flashed. Anthony Davis to the Wizards. His response? Poor guy. Just those 2 words. Poor guy said it. All. Jackson didn't start crunching salary cap numbers or handing out trade grades. He led with pure empathy, feeling the pain of a superstar who has been treated like a nomad, constantly uprooted and blindsided by front office power plays. But then something clicked, and he realized what this means for DC as a basketball town. Suddenly, the pity turned into hype. Poor guy? Wait, Trae Young is there? Okay, that is actually fire. I am telling you right now, when the Wizards start winning, that city is going to lose its mind over that. Squad, the D, MV, is a powder keg just waiting to explode for hoops. I filmed swagger out there for years, trust me. Look, the NFL draft hits D. C, next year, 2027. Mark my words, the Washington Wizards will be deep in the playoffs when we roll into town for the draft. Eisen was skeptical, but Jackson doubled down. I am saying yes, book it. Oh man, I don't know. But then, showing his deep respect for the brow, Jackson dropped one of the realest comments of the whole saga. I need Anthony Davis to be mad. A player of his caliber shouldn't be shuffled around like this. The way this went down, traded in the dead of night, it's disrespectful. It happened today! No, I mean, the Lakers exit too. That is just the wrong way to treat a legend. We got Luka out of it, so I will shut up. But getting shipped off again the very next season, that has got to hurt. I just hope this fuels him to become that beast who won the chip in 2020. God bless AD. I love that dude to death. What a world. But honestly, I think he is in a good spot. It is the Wizards. I really believe that. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more updates. Now, what about the Harden deal? Finally, we have to talk about Nick Wright, who came through with a scorched earth reality check on this whole situation. Wright, who never shies away from a hot take, went absolutely nuclear on the Dallas front office, while giving Washington their flowers. Look, the original Luka trade was a catastrophe, but the sub-disaster here is getting almost nothing out of 1 year of A, D, and then dumping him. For pennies on the dollar, you didn't even get a playoff run out of him. By my math, you are selling Anthony Davis at his absolute lowest value. You got markedly less for A, D, than the Grizzlies got for Jaren Jackson Jr. That is a tough pill to swallow. Hold on. That just feels wrong. Why pull the trigger right this second? What is with the sudden panic? Why couldn't they wait until the summer? I just don't get the Mavs' logic, and honestly, Brew is spot on with his take. Wright really hammered the timing, questioning why Dallas couldn't just hold their horses until the offseason. He felt for the fans who basically got the rug pulled out from under them. But then he flipped the script to look at the Washington side. He laid out a killer argument that cuts straight to the chase of why this trade is a total win for the Wizards. From the DC perspective, this is a home run. I have to split with you on this one because this looks great for them. Yeah, because to me, Brew, this is rock bottom risk with a potentially massive payout. It is a no-brainer. I don't look at anything they shipped out and think that in 4 years they are going to be kicking themselves. It is not like they traded away a young SGA only to watch him evolve into a league MVP somewhere else. That is the money quote right there. Washington didn't give up a single asset that is going to come back to haunt them. They didn't hand over a future icon or burn their own picks. They made a savvy play where even the worst case scenario is safe. It won't set the franchise back, but best case, it could rocket them into serious contention in the Eastern Conference. Minimal risk, maximum reward. Sometimes that is the whole ballgame. If you agree, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you dug this breakdown, go ahead and tap one of the videos popping up on your screen. We have got plenty more analysis waiting for you just a click away, so dive on in.